What's up, everybody? Happy Halloween, and welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are not talking about fantasy, but instead talking about a spooky Halloween story, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Upcoming episodes include a solo review video for The Eye of the World, unless it's already posted by the time this video goes up. And The Name of the Wind, the first book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. Our friend Chris has just finished reading that book for the first time. So we're super excited to get his thoughts and first impressions of that wonderful book. If you want to keep up on what we've been reading and get a good laugh from our nonsensical random tweets, please follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, or just look up the Fantasy Files podcast. We'd also very much appreciate it if you would like and subscribe down below here on YouTube, as it helps us out a lot as we try to grow this community. Before we get going into the book, let's talk a little bit about what we've been reading. What have you been reading anything other than like our regularly scheduled stuff lately?
So a little bit, not too crazy. I have started the Iron Druid Chronicles again, but I haven't like listened very hardcore. I might do an hour here and then the rest of what we have planned to do and whatnot. So that's one that I'm going to slowly work through again. But other than that, no, it's just been the of course Hill House, and then now we're listening to Name of the Wind, and so that's really been it for the last couple of weeks or so for me, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of in the same boat. It's mostly been just podcast stuff. However, I did read The Expanse Book 5, which is Nemesis Games. And I think we talked about this a little bit, but yeah, I liked it. It was fine. It definitely wasn't like my favorite book in the series so far. I would say I liked it maybe a little bit more than book number 3, because I really didn't like book number 3. But I probably liked it a little bit more than that. It was kind of cool because all of the characters at the beginning of book 5, they all kind of split up because the Rocinante is getting repairs done.
Yeah.
And so they have like all this time off. And so they all kind of go their own ways for a while. Like Alex is going back to Mars to, do some things, and Amos is going back to Earth to take care of some things. And Naomi is going out to the belt to do some things. And then Holden is left at Tycho Station with Fred Johnson.
Okay. Interesting.
And so, yeah. And so everybody is like completely split up, and Holden is like super depressed because he's like very
everybody's
used to
gone.
having his crew.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yep.
And so it was really interesting to it was really interesting to see how everybody kind of operates when they're left to their own devices, and they don't have kind of the vote of the crew determining what they're doing. So like Amos off on his own is really, really interesting.
I bet.
Naomi off on her own is very interesting. That book, I'll be honest, like Nemesis Games made me hate Naomi. Like
no way,
at least,
dude.
At least just
I
for that
love
book.
her character, man.
Yeah,
but I haven't read as far as you. So.
I do too, and I think that it got better by the end of the book.
Yeah.
But she made a decision that really kind of upset me. Like she basically, and none of this is spoilers, but she basically lied to Holden about about part of her life and like where she's going and stuff. And she like didn't need to, because Holden isn't gonna like say, no, you can't go do that, or anything. I feel like it was kind of like, because it was kind of a big deal, like the thing that she lied about, especially with her and Holden having been like dating as long as they have been.
Yep.
And it it was kind of like, I'm like, that's not something you should lie about, but it was kind of brushed under the rug as this thing of like, oh, like Holden doesn't need to know that, and he's gonna trust her, and like, you know, she's like a strong, independent woman or whatever, which she is, but it's like still like that's what she lied about was something that you should tell your partner about. And I don't think that it should be brushed under the rug like that. So yeah, that part of the book really, like, it was, the plot was good, but it just made me like Naomi a little less.
Okay, gotcha. So,
Yeah.
so do you jump back and forth between each of the crew members? Like, do you get to
Yeah.
see from all the okay, that's cool. That's what
Yeah.
I think you may have told me that, but I wasn't quite clear on it, but that's good. And
Yeah.
that
So,
sucks about
oh,
Naomi. I hope that I don't feel the same way, dude, because I freaking love
yeah.
Naomi.
Yeah, me too. And I think she'll be fine going forward,
Yeah.
but just for this book, I was like, that was a stupid decision you shouldn't have made.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, and seeing like Amos off on his own, that was my favorite
Oh,
part of the
yeah, I
story,
can't
was
wait for
following
that.
Amos.
I can't wait
Oh,
for that.
dude, it was so cool, especially because he goes back to Earth, and so we
Yeah.
get to see like what Earth looks like in this future, because we haven't really seen much of
Yeah, for
Earth
sure. We
at
just
this
we just
point.
heard, or at least the
Um,
government officials anyways. That's all we've gotten.
yeah, and it is not what you think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was really good to go see what's happening on Earth right now.
Awesome.
But yeah, I've, the thing that I'm worried about is that I looked at reviews for the sixth book. I can't remember what it's called, but I looked at reviews for that, and people were like, I'm not going to, but people were saying you should skip this book and read a plot summary on it.
Oh, wow.
There, because like nobody was really liking the sixth book,
Okay.
and
Interesting.
they were like, that people were saying that it's basically a extension of Nemesis games, and that it should have just been covered in a quick prologue on the next book, or it should have been covered in the epilogue of Nemesis games. um and so I'm not really looking forward to that, but it's, I'm gonna read it in the same way that I would read Ghost Story
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Dresden Files. So it's probably the ghost story of, The Expanse.
Interesting.
And so, I'm gonna read it, but I don't think it's gonna be that enjoyable. But I I am just getting excited for the end of this series. Like, I'm not excited for it to be over, but I'm excited to learn more and kind of see where this series goes,
Yep.
because the final book for this series actually comes out November 30th.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that it wasn't out. I thought the series
me
was already
neither.
finished. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I thought so too. But I'm kind of like, there's no way we're gonna be able to cover that in time for it to come out. So we're just gonna
Yeah.
read it and enjoy it.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm excited for that. I probably won't read it. I probably won't be caught up by the time that comes out. But it's good to know that it's soon, and that we don't have to
We're not
wait
gonna have to
a
wait
long
crazy long.
time
Yeah,
for the
for sure.
series to be over. And I'm just loving this series so much. And also the show, I know we talked about this a little bit
Yep.
the other day too, but man, the show is so good. The show is so good. Like, man,
I know it's on my list,
it,
man. It's on my
yeah,
list. Like I said, I just finished watching Hill House through,
yeah,
to the last episode they put out, and so now we're gonna start it. We're gonna see.
yeah, yeah. I think you're gonna love it. It's, there's a lot of scenes that they keep. They're like the exact same in the book,
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of kind of little plot things that they change that kind of upset me a little bit, but in the end it didn't change the overall story.
Yeah.
Like, the overall story for each book is still the exact same. Just like how they get to that is a little switched around
Yep.
in some places. But yeah, like I said the other day, I was watching an episode late at night, and just like this thing happens in the episode, and it's been a long time since I have watched something that like literally made my heart race.
Yeah.
And I was sitting like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, like
Yeah. Yep. That's good
it
TV,
was so
man.
good. Yeah, it's phenomenal. um so yeah, I'm enjoying that a lot. Upcoming, we also have so after this, after Name of the Wind, we'll probably be starting the Greenbone saga, which is the Jade City books.
Yep.
I've already read the first one, but I'm going to reread the first one with Gabe, and we're going to do that pretty much all of November up until the third book comes out. So that'll be really fun. I think we're going to like that a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sweet.
So in the interest of the Halloween season, and in the interest of padding out this episode, have you ever had like a ghostly or like haunting type experience at all? Like any interaction with the paranormal in any way?
Not that I could recall. I remember when I was little, there were a couple times where like so we had a bunk bed. You know, I have a little brother, right? And I was little, like really little. And I was in the top bunk, my brother was in the bottom bunk. And there would be these like weird noises, right? They weren't, I don't know if they were knocks or like louder footsteps. And I would get up because I was so curious. And there was everybody was asleep. The house was quiet. We didn't have any, or we had dogs, but they were all asleep. You know what I mean? So it was
Right.
like, and I remember thinking about it, and I was just confused. I was like, wait, but that doesn't make any sense, you know? Doesn't Why is there noises? And I left it at that. I didn't get freaked out. I didn't think too far past that.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably really it, man. The house creaking and stuff like that, I've heard plenty and whatnot, but not really that I can really like bring back up, I guess.
Yeah. The only one that I've really had, and I might have told you this story before, but I was living, I was renting a room in this house, and it was literally like almost like right across the street from my mom's house. It was like across the street and down the street. And so I was like really close, and that'll come into play in a second here. But when I went to look at this house to like rent this room, there was one room in the back of the house that I was going to rent, but it was full of stuff. And I'm like, so are you going to clear out this room before if I were to move into it? And he's like, yeah, we'd definitely clear it out. And then he showed me this other room. And then just like super casually in conversation, he said that his both, not all at the same time, but his mom, his dad, and his uncle all died in that house,
Oh my
in
gosh,
their rooms. Yeah.
dude, what?
And I was like, I kind of like had my back to a corner, so to speak, because I really needed to rent a room like right now, and this was the
Yeah.
only place that was like accepting anybody.
Yep.
And so I rented the one room where nobody had killed themselves in it,
Yeah.
or I
Yeah.
don't know if they killed themselves, but they died
But
there.
yeah.
And but every time dude, it's weird. Every time I would, because where the uncle lived, it was kind of like this storage room. And
Yeah.
so I'd have to go back there sometimes. And I don't know if it was just like the kind of mental, like the idea that he had died in there or what, but every time I went back there, it felt super creepy. And so here's where the ghost story comes in. It's pretty crazy. So I rented a room kind of in the back hallway, and from the living room, if you're like looking at the TV to your right, you can like see down the hallway. It was kind of this long hallway. There was like maybe six rooms total on that hallway.
Wow, so
And
big house
so
then.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
pretty big. It was like one story, but it was big, wide.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and so in this hallway, and this will all make sense in a minute, but in the hallway, there's three lights going down it, like three lights on the
Yeah.
ceiling in the hallway. Um, and my roommates both worked at Whole Foods or something, and they worked the graveyard shift. So they were gone from like 10 at night to like 6 in the morning. And like stocking food and
Yep.
stuff like that. So I am sitting in the living room at probably about midnight, and I'm like watching TV or whatever. And I just get this weird feeling, and the hall lights are on. I have a lamp right to my left that's on, and then the TV's on. And I just get like, and people are gonna call bullshit or whatever, but I just get like this weird ass feeling, just
Yeah.
like this super like weird feeling. And I look to my right and look down the hallway, and two things happened at the same time. I get this feeling of something like rushing towards me, and the lights went out one by one, starting at the
Oh,
back
oh,
hallway. The very back light went out, then the middle, then the other one, and then my fucking lamp.
oh my
And
gosh, dude.
dude, I got up like as soon as like I don't know how my reaction time was so fast, but as soon as it started happening, like I just had this feeling like I needed to
Yeah.
go. I literally jumped over the living room table, and the front door is like right there.
Yeah.
And I literally just like grabbed my skateboard by the front door, and I just booked it out the door. I didn't have shoes on. I just booked it out the door, and I like rode my skateboard, like ran across the lawn, got into the street, like just rode
Yeah.
my skateboard all the way down to my mom's house. And I was
That's so
probably
crazy,
like,
dude.
dude, I was probably like maybe like 19 or 20, I
Yeah.
think, somewhere around there. And dude, it was
That sounds
geez, it was
terrifying.
dude, it was
Terrifying.
terrifying. It's like literally the craziest thing that's ever happened to me.
That's
And so
insane.
I went to my mom's house, and I was just like freaked out.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, she's like a hardcore Christian. And so she's like, you know, let me come back to your house and just kind of like look at things. And she kind of like prayed over the house and
Yep.
stuff while she was there. And you know, it was like my mom, like if you ask my mom, she'll tell you, she's like, I've never seen Spencer so scared in his
I
entire
I
life.
I believe you, man. I totally believe you.
Dude, it
That's
was
insane.
dude, it was nuts. And so yeah, then I went back, and
Were
everything was pretty much fine.
were the
You
lights
know,
back on and everything?
the
Were the
lights
lights
were back
okay?
on. Yeah.
Whoa. Weird,
And
dude.
yeah, and it was super super odd. And that night everything felt a little bit weird, but after that, like it all pretty much went back to normal. I
That's
moved out
crazy.
shortly after. It wasn't
Yeah, I
too
bet.
long
I
after that
bet.
I moved
I
out.
bet. I would have been looking
Um
for a house that night.
yeah, dude, it was like terrifying. And I tried telling my roommates about it, and one of the roommates, the guy that owned the house, he was like, yeah, I don't know, like that's, you know, whatever. It was probably an electrical issue or something. But when all of
That's what
those
everybody
lights go out
would
in a
say,
row,
man. Come on.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. And the other roommate, the guy who had moved in around the time that I moved in, he had probably moved in like a month before me. Um, he he told me, he's like, dude, I felt some weird stuff in this house too. So
Yeah.
it's not just you. And
Wow.
yeah, it was super odd, man. I think that was the only experience that I've had with anything supernatural like that. The only other thing was there was this park that was right across from my mom's house growing up, and it was called Edith Moulton. And it's this big park with all these trails that go through it,
Yep.
and it connects to like this apartment complex. and so sometimes you like go through the woods to get to the apartment complex, and I've never experienced anything super weird there besides just like going through there at night and like normal creepiness.
Yeah.
But there's like this big board at the front of the park that like tells you about the park's history.
Yep.
And what the park used to be was this mansion, and there was a mansion up on the kind of like center of it.
Yeah.
And the parents were out doing something one night, and there was this little girl inside, and her name was Edith Moulton, and the house somehow burned down with her inside it.
Oh, whoa.
And so yeah, it's super super creepy. Yeah,
Dang,
it's
dude.
really really weird. Yeah.
That's wild. That's super wild. Yeah, part of me like wishes that I had more like intense experiences like that. And then the other part's like, nah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't want
good.
to, I don't want to go through that, you know? Like, no, thank
Yeah,
you. But that's wild, dude.
yeah, for sure. Um, where you guys are living now, is it like at night? Does your house make any like creepy noises or anything? Like, does it feel okay at night?
Yeah, no, it
Feels
feels
fine.
fine at night. I haven't had any problems. So before the apartment that we live in now, I live with my grandma's house, and that house was built by her. Like she paid for it to be built, so it was, I want to say, clean for lack of a better word, right? Nothing crazy
Right.
happened there and whatnot. But the house that my parents bought prior to that, they bought it in 2014. There was a death in the house, and I do kind of remember like nothing crazy happened, but I do remember some weird, like in the middle of the night, like I would wake up and have these really weird, intense, like emotional feelings, right? Like that were like
Yeah.
not because of a dream, not because of like something that happened to me or whatever else. Like it was just like this abnormal, like weird kind of visceral feeling, I guess. And that's like what part of my head wants to like attribute it to that. Like, you know, there was some energy
Mhm.
there that kind of got spent off on me, and I
For
soaked it up
sure.
and whatnot. But other than that, yeah, not really too crazy. And where we're at now is not crazy at all. It's a pretty,
Yeah.
I think it was built in like, it's not that old, you know, so it's pretty fresh. And there's a lot of people
Yeah.
here. I mean, there's like, this apartment complex is huge. There's so many people
Right.
that live here. So that might have something to play with it. But
I was honestly kind of worried when I've pretty much had roommates or whatever my entire life up
yeah,
until this last year. And so when I moved in somewhere like completely by myself, I
yeah,
was worried a little bit that like sometimes I would get like creeped out or whatever
yep,
coming home to like a dark apartment.
yeah,
But it really hasn't been that way at all. Like I
yep,
haven't experienced just that kind of weird feeling of being home alone.
yep. That is good.
Which was cool.
Your dog Hank probably helps with that too.
Yes,
Your
yeah,
little buddy.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, one last question to
Yep.
what are your favorite like spooky, whether it's movies or video games or TV shows, like what are your favorite like horror spooky kind of overall,
Okay.
media?
Yep. Yep. So the fear games, like some of the first fear games, like Fear 2, and I think the first one might have just been called Fear. I don't know if I played the first one, but Fear 2, and I think there's one after that I played, and they were my absolute favorite because they would scare the shit out of me. I would be
Ooh.
so scared to play those games, man, but they were so much fun. And that's for that. And then me, I'm like a hardcore just Halloween lover. You know, Michael Myers is my dude. I like to
Oh, okay.
yep, I love the way that they play that out. It's not like very supernatural in the sense of like ghosts and stuff, but you know, you got this kind of crazy abnormal dude that goes nuts. So that would probably be it for that. I mean, I like, what's the other ones? Like Poltergeist is a great movie. There's a couple other scary ones that I think we watched recently. I don't know. You have to get back to me on that. I don't know if I can
Because
remember.
you guys have been watching like horror movies and stuff all month, right?
Yeah, so well, we've been trying to. So we had this plan. We've got a list of horror movies that we watch, and we'll use a number generator, and it'll pick one for the night, right? But since we started Hill House, that has been
Yeah,
non-existent. So we've just been watching
right.
Hill House every night. And now that House is over, we'll probably go back to that. We watched one. Oh, what was it called? Oh, what was it called? Malignant. Yeah, Malignant.
Oh,
That's such a good movie, dude. That is such a good movie.
it's scary.
Yes, it was terrifying, but it was the kind of terrifying where you're like you have the expectation of what you think is going to happen is like not even close to what is going on. Like there's not a
Yeah.
human being, in my opinion, that could have guessed what would have happened if they didn't know.
Ooh.
Yes, and it was so good and so terrifying.
Whoa.
I highly recommend it. Highly recommend Malignant. It was a great movie.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I really haven't watched that many like horror movies. I've seen like The Ring and The Grudge.
Yeah, The Ring's good.
I've seen like the Paranormal Activity movies.
Yep,
Those were
yep.
scary when they first came out. Um, yeah, I think I like The Babadook. Have you seen The Babadook?
Yes, we watched that like maybe 4 or 5 nights ago. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Yeah, that was kind of a spooky one that
Yep.
it's one of those ones that's like not too bad,
Yeah.
spooky wise.
But it's good though. The story's really
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah, it is good. And so yeah, I did like that a lot. I think I even own it. I think I might own the Babadook.
Nice.
But yeah, so as far as video games, I don't think I've really played
Well,
that
so
many.
let me just interject really quick. You and I have played whatever those story games are called. I forget
Oh
the
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's a
those are
great.
terrifying. Yeah, those are
Yeah,
really good. I
the
forgot about them
dark
too.
they're the Dark Pictures anthology.
Mythology, exactly. Yes.
And one's called Little Hope, I think. What was the
And then
first one?
the first that has to do with the oh gosh. I'm
I'm
so
gonna look it
bad
up.
with names, man. Yeah, look it up. I'm so bad with names.
Oh, the Wendigo.
The Wendigo. Thank you,
Yeah,
dude. That's it. That's exactly what I was thinking of. That's the beast, right? It's not just Jeremy Mack, it's or whatever the
that's
dude's name
right.
is.
Rami
Okay,
Malek.
okay. Rami Malek. Okay. Jeremy Mack. Oh, okay. All right. So now I'm happy. I'm happy.
Okay, so yeah, for those games, there was Until Dawn, which for some reason isn't mentioned in the Wikipedia page, but it was
Hmm.
Until Dawn, then Man of Medan, Little Hope, and then House of Ashes just came out like literally days ago, which I
Oh,
didn't even know.
what? Yeah, I
That's the
didn't know that
one.
either.
Remember when we were at the end of the Little Hope game, the one we
Yeah.
played most recently? And then at the end there was like that clip of the girl falling off the rock or whatever.
Yeah.
That one's going to be House of Ashes, so we're definitely going to have to
Okay, cool.
find a time for you to come over
Yep,
and play
yep,
that.
yep.
It's going to be
I'm
awesome.
down. I'm down.
But yeah, anyway, that was a super fun horror video game, especially because you and your friend are interacting in the way of like you're both making decisions, you
Yeah.
control different characters, and you're basically in a horror movie. Like it's basically like an
Yep.
interactive movie and you're just making decisions. And so yeah, those games are a little fun. I forgot about those when we initially were talking about it.
Yep, no, you're good. Yeah. I like them too. Because there's so many different endings, right? You make a decision and it changes the entire rest of the game. It's all different because of that decision that you made.
Right. And they do such a good job of just creating tension in those games. Like
Yeah.
how many times have you and I been on the edge of our seats like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God,
Yeah.
oh my God, oh my
Oh
God, like
yeah.
go,
Yep.
go, go, go. Like or shoot him, shoot him, shoot him.
Yeah, yeah. Don't miss, don't miss. Hit Y, hit Y.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Should we talk about this book?
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
So we're about to talk about the Haunting of Hill House, and this is your spoiler warning. We're gonna talk about everything in this book from front to back. So if you haven't read the book and really want to, then maybe come back later and join us then. But for now, spoiler warning in
Yep.
3, 2, 1. You've been warned. Um, Okay, so our first impressions of this book, what did you think?
So I just as we start to talk about this book, I just want to preface the fact that I had, like I said before, I watched the entire series. I watched it
Right.
on TV, and I think that somewhat ruined it for me because the only thing that's really the same are a couple names and Hill House. It's a lot
Right.
different. And I was so into the show, and so I tried to like mesh the show and the book, and they're not meshable. You know, they're different stories and
Yeah.
whatnot. But with that said, I don't want to say like I liked the book. I don't want to say I thoroughly enjoyed it because a lot of it I was like not lost, but I was like, wow, this there's a lot going on here. Like she's like either having a mental breakdown or the house is actually freaking out or whatever else. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed the read. And again, I think that I wish I should not have watched the series prior because I think it biased me. You know, and
Yeah.
in part to the book. But with that
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of like, um, I think that the premise of it is good, and I think the idea, you know, of instead of like, yeah, I don't want to give away the show. I probably shouldn't say that. Yeah, it was good. We'll just stop there.
Yeah, so I had really mixed feelings on this book.
Yeah,
And I know that sometimes we're kind of like the surface level like dude bros of the booktube world. We don't read a lot of like classic literature.
yeah,
Like a lot of what we read is like modern fantasy that is kind of
hmm,
like flash bang boom kind
yep,
of actiony stuff. So maybe I just didn't catch like the depth or any of like the subtle nuances of this book. But I legitimately just did not get it. Like
yeah,
I did not get this book. I have like I know the story. I know every single thing that happens in this book,
yeah,
but I guess where I'm at is, I one of the reasons why I suggested this book for us to read was because I had seen so many reviews, both like Mike's book reviews and
yeah,
Murphy Napier and a few other people, and they were like, "Oh, this book is so good. It was so
yeah,
scary." And I just, to each their own,
yep,
but
yep,
I just did not understand that take. Like
yeah,
I just don't understand why people like this book. And like
yeah,
it's fine.
yep,
Like this book is fine, but I don't understand like the overwhelming love for
yeah,
this
yeah.
book, I
Okay,
guess.
yes, I'm so with you.
Um yeah, cuz I was like cuz again, it was fine, but it was not there was like maybe two things in the book that were like really scary.
Yeah,
Other than that, it was like a lot of sitting by the fire and drinking brandy
yep,
and talking. Like I was just kind of like, okay. Um, but yeah, I didn't really, unless I just missed some really subtle nuances, and I'm sure that I did because I was actually reading a book review online today. I can't remember who posted it, but they were going like chapter by chapter and talking about like very like old school like literary kind of analysis type things, and kind of like making these like really subtle connections, and I was like, man, I just did not make those same connections. Um like so do you remember when Theodora accuses Eleanor of dumping all the red stuff in her room on her
yeah,
clothes and stuff,
and
and that kind of
yep,
whole
and
back and forth
hinting, yeah,
happens?
yep,
Um, so Theodora may have a suspicion when she accused, this is from the book review.
yeah,
Theodora may have a suspicion when she accuses Eleanor of writing her own name on the hall paneling and later above Theodora's bed. No one notices the writing on their way from breakfast to the den. Luke doesn't notice it on his way to cajole coffee from Mrs. Dudley. No one then could have physically written the words, but Eleanor or Hill House via Eleanor
Oh,
might have physically scrawled them between Luke's going and returning.
yeah.
Theodora, telepathic, could know that Eleanor was in some manner responsible for the writing, and Eleanor, aware of Theodora's sensitivity, could know that Theodora knew. Hence, her conviction at the end of the chapter section that shocking Eleanor out of hysterics wasn't all Theodora was doing with her accusation. Theodora actually meant it. And so I didn't really catch on to this idea that Theodora was like telepathically sensitive to Eleanor's like kind of paranormal thing, or that Eleanor might be connected to the ghost in some way, and like it was kind of like acting through her in a supernatural way.
Yep.
And so like little things like that I just didn't pick up on. So maybe so, apparently a lot of people did, and it just went way over my head. I think while we were listening to this book, I was definitely kind of thinking like, man, I really wish that we had picked a more modern horror story.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I realized how old this story was until I actually got into it, and I'm like, oh wow, they're using like a lot of old-timey language. Like I think this was written in 1958, if I remember
and it was
correctly.
published in 1959, exactly.
Yeah. And so it's very old-timey compared to what we normally read. And so I think that was another thing that just kind of threw me off. The question that brings up, what I just read, is the house really haunted, or is it Eleanor's? Well, is it all in Eleanor's head and she somehow did those things, or is it the ghost? Is the ghost not originating from the house but actually following or riding along inside Eleanor? Because she has kind of this paranormal experience when she's younger with all the rocks falling on the house. And so a lot of the theories are that there was a ghost that kind of has been riding along with her entire life, and that she brought that with her to Hill House. And so like the writing on the wall and all that stuff, Eleanor isn't physically doing it, but because Eleanor is there, the supernatural is reaching out through her
and doing
kind of doing these things. I don't know. It's a theory. Let's talk about Shirley Jackson for a second. So she's this author from the 50s, and a lot of just from listening to other podcasts and hearing other people talk about it, a lot of her other works are kind of about like these fears of domestic life. So like, Haunting of Hill House, it like happens in this house where, and it deals with like loneliness, like being alone in a house or just being alone in life in general. And so a lot of her works are about that, apparently. I haven't read many of them, but what I have read is, have you heard about this short story called The Lottery? Did you have to read it in school or anything?
Nope.
So I had this very, very cool English teacher near the end of high school, and she showed me so many books that like the kind of books you don't normally get in school. It's not like they're all classic literature, but it's like she kind of chose unconventional books for us to read for English class,
which is cool.
And one of them was The Lottery. And oh my gosh, this short story is so good. It was the first thing that really made me fall in love with like a darker kind of twisted story. and it made me fall in love with like plot twists, and
Oh.
it's really, really cool. If you don't think that you're gonna read it, I'll tell you about it. But if you
Okay.
think you're gonna read it, I'll wait.
I don't know. You might as well just tell me because I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay, so spoilers for the lottery. I'm gonna put a timestamp up on the screen right here, so that you guys can go forward to that if you don't want to get spoiled for the short story, The Lottery. So in the lottery, there's like this small town, kind of, it almost, you get the idea that it's like cut off from the rest of the world. And the story starts with all these people in like the main square of the town, and they're all drawing a card to win this lottery, the town's lottery. And there's kind of like this big podium type thing in the middle of the in the middle of the square, and
Yep.
this guy is like reading off the numbers of people who, if I remember correctly, he's reading off numbers of people who didn't win or something like that. But everyone is like super excited for the lottery. It's like this big thing that happens every year in this town, and people are like it seems like it's like a really good thing, and like somebody's about to win a lot of money or win a house or property or something. And so you kind of go through this short story, and you get to catch a few conversations between these different characters, and you kind of hear about people that won the lottery from the previous year and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. And so up until the end, it seems like winning this lottery is a good thing that everybody wants to happen. And then at the end, the person who has the black dot on their lottery card is the winner.
Oh.
And so the very like last, it's literally like the last couple sentences of the book, or of the short story. You find out who has the black dot on their card, and they're like, oh my God, like I have the winning ticket. And everybody steps away from them and stones them to death.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, dude.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That's
Isn't that
crazy.
crazy?
That's crazy, dude.
Dude, it was,
Wow.
dude, I remember reading that and being like, I was so surprised when I got to the end of it. And I was just like,
What
that
the
is the
heck?
coolest thing I've ever read. Like it
Yeah.
surprised me so
Yeah.
much. And I like went up to my teacher and I was like, thank you for showing us that. Like that,
Wow.
like it made me fall in love with like plot twists and kind of like a
Yeah. Just,
darker, more sinister story.
yep. Yep.
Yeah, so it was really, really cool. Spoilers over for the lottery, but you know, it shows it, you know, that's I haven't read any of her other works besides The Lottery and Hill House, but if any of her other works are like this, you know, there's a similarity between the ending of The Lottery and the ending of this book. You know, this book ends like violently and
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this one final plot twist before the story ends.
Yep.
And so I thought the similarities between the two of them were pretty interesting. What did you think of this narrator, Bernadette Dunn?
So I don't think I liked her all that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think that her voice is great and she sounded good, and I feel like she had the right accent, but the way that she spoke the words was like not the way that I felt it should have been for like such a like mental kind of disturbing read, right? You know?
Yeah.
There were some parts where I thought it was great, and then other parts where I was like, man, she just doesn't have enough going on to like really portray what this is, what's happening or what this is doing. So I would
Yeah.
probably, if I was to rate her on like out of 10 scale, I'd give her a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think I almost wonder how different it is as someone who's new to the story to read the book on paper versus
Oh,
listening
yeah.
to the audiobook,
Yep.
because I kind of got the feeling that this book was supposed to be a little dark and a little creepier,
Yeah.
but the narrator just said everything in such a like pleasant
Yeah.
way that it never felt dark. It never felt scary or intimidating. And so I kind of wonder if the if reading it, you would get a much different feel if you kind of had your own like
Narrator or whatever.
narrative in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
head. Yeah. If you would get like a very different feel from it.
I could see that. That would, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Um, okay, so this type of storytelling, it's third person, told mostly from Eleanor's point of view.
Yep.
And this gets interesting because we don't really get the POVs of any other characters.
Yeah.
We're mostly writing with Eleanor. And at the end, when she is kind of going crazy, and actually all throughout the book, because throughout the book, she's starting to get a little bit weirder and a little bit weirder and a little bit weirder. And you can see the house kind of taking a toll on her. And so getting everything from her perspective was kind of like you're like along for the ride with her, and you're kind of seeing this spiral into insanity. And
Yeah.
if you don't know, like if you don't know she's going crazy, you would probably just be like, oh, that was weird, why did she do that? Which is
Yeah.
exactly how I reacted at first.
Yep.
But then when you get to the end and realize that she's been like slowly going crazy over this week-long experience,
Yeah.
you start to see all this weird stuff that she was doing, and you're like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense.
Yep.
Because the things that she says just gets weirder and weirder and weirder.
For sure.
Um, so I don't want to rip this off from the Overdue podcast. So shout out to them because they're the ones I was listening to when they talked about this. But they brought up a good point that there is a difference between horror and terror.
Hmm.
In that I think the way they said it was like horror is like jump scares and things being like visually scary, like jumping out at you scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And terror is kind of this slowly settling sense of unease, like
Yep.
this slow kind of build up into like extremely uncomfortable and scared.
Yeah.
And I did think that that was one thing that this book did pretty well, especially right from the beginning when Eleanor shows up to this house, and it's like describing it and how like looming and
Yeah.
intimidating this house was. And it said that it like kind of wrapped itself around her.
Yep.
And you kind of have this sense that the house is like this big thing that like encapsulates and
For
consumes.
sure. Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of cool as far as like it's building up that slow drip of terror. I still didn't think this book was that scary.
Yeah.
But the way that it used what it had was pretty cool.
Yep. I totally agree.
Did you have any like scary moments from this book at all? Anything that set you on edge a little bit?
No, honestly, nothing that was like scary, like the the non-terror side where it was like a jump scare or anything. But I do think that kind of as you've talked about, seeing the spiral, and again, I'm trying to separate this in my head, and it's so hard. But like the show, like there were some jump scares, but again, it was more of a more of a mental scare, right? Which the book is the same way. It's a very mentally like disturbing kind of, this descent into insanity is what you said, right? And that's what it is.
Right.
And I think that scared me more, like watching Eleanor's kind of depravity or this fall in breakdown into this kind of like this terror, and to the point where she like has no idea what what's going on. Like she doesn't know the real word. Like she doesn't know what's happening. Like I think that was probably the scariest to me. It's just like watching the slow spiral of like, all of a sudden, like she's disconnected from reality, right? Like she's absorbed into Hill House, and it's like scary, for her.
Yeah.
So that's probably it. There wasn't a lot of like jump scares or anything. Like there were some scary moments. Like the paint kind of waked me out until I thought about it and figured it out, or or thought about it more and whatnot. But other than that, it was definitely more psychological than like the jump scares and the freaky,
Right.
Instantaneous, like, oh gosh.
The only thing that tripped me out a little bit, and I was listening to it late at night when this was happening, was the knocking on the door when they're in the room.
Yeah,
and
sure.
like the ghost is like knocking
on the
up
top
on the
part
door,
of the door.
like
Yeah.
way further than anybody could reach.
Yep.
So that was
Yep, I
pretty
agree.
cool.
That was spooky. Yes.
So something that was kind of cool, and for lack of better word, I'm gonna say like world building.
Yeah.
Was the house is really our only location in this book besides like the very beginning. But the house is basically a character in and of itself. Like it's got all these different aspects to it.
For sure.
And yeah, it was I did like the idea of this house, as far as like it has this history of these residents where one guy's wives kept dying. I think he had like 2 or 3 wives, and they kept dying. And then 2 sisters became violently angry with each other, being nasty to each other. And then the older one hung herself, which is kind of a mirror thing we see with Eleanor and Theodora, because when they first met, they were like very friendly to each other, but the more stuff that kept happening, the more they just got like violent with each other, the more angry they got with each other for like no good reason.
Yep.
The other thing that I thought was pretty cool about the house was the angles in the house being so like just slightly off kilter. And that's something interesting to think about. Like imagine if you spent enough time in the house where just every wall, every like vertical part, every like just the shape of a room was just slightly out of square.
Oh, yeah.
And like the floor was just a little bit unlevel.
Oh, yeah.
Like after a while, you would start to feel pretty unsteady.
Yep,
like
you would get bothered. I would be bothered by that. Like that would eventually like really get to me if shit was not lining up like it should normally.
Right. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing to put in there, something that I had never really thought about before. And so I love that. I honestly just really wish there was a sequel to this book. Like I think there should have been, because like this book did not answer enough questions, I think.
So let me just say right now, just really quick, interrupt, cut you off, whatever, just watch the show. That's all I'm gonna say. Watch the show.
Yeah,
but
I feel like I'm afraid they're so different that it's not going to answer the questions from the book though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that makes sense. If you got questions from this book specifically about that, but the Hill House is the same. And the reason why I say this is that like the story behind Hill House, between all the people that died, and there was a song sung at the end of this book that was like about the Grottons, right? And the chick sings the song about, old Grandpa Groton was sitting all gray and whatever, and he sang this. Like that song happened in the show, and it does explain kind of the backstory, but just with the different the people that inside it, the people that are inside the house are related differently. That's like really what it is. But it's good. Watch it. I'll quit
Okay.
talking about the show because it's not the book, but still, it's good.
For sure. Yeah, but really, I think, there was so much in this book that I was totally expecting to get
Yeah,
explored. And by the time in the book where the wife of the doctor shows up,
yeah.
Dr. Montague,
Montague, yeah.
by the time she shows up, I was looking at the audiobook and it was like, you have an hour and a half left.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, wait, what? How is everything going to get wrapped up in that
yeah.
time? And sure enough, it doesn't. So there's a lot about
Yeah,
this house
yeah,
that we
yeah,
don't really get to know. And it kind of disappointed me a little bit.
for sure.
The other thing that was interesting about this house is they are quickly falling under the house's spell. It is enticing them to stay. The only ones unaffected by this are the newcomers later in the book, or at least they're
Yeah.
not affected by the time, we say goodbye to them.
Ar
Um,
Arthur and was it
Mrs.
Arthur and
Montague.
Dr. Missing? Yeah, okay.
I don't think, did they ever say her name? I don't know.
No, they didn't.
Um,
It's always Mrs. Montague.
um, but yeah, and so it's interesting to see, because usually you get your haunted house story where the house is actively trying to get you to leave, like it is
Yeah,
actively trying to scare you enough to get out of the house. But this is a house that wants to entice you and stay with it and
yep,
become a part of the house.
yeah,
And so I thought that was a really interesting take on like the classic haunted house, right?
yep,
So this is a quote from the end of the book, and it, it's almost the same exact quote from the beginning of the book, which kind of shows you like this circular nature to this house. Like it always is and it always was, and no
yeah,
matter who does what in the house, it will always be this kind of dark foreboding thing in kind of this never-ending cycle until someone like destroys the book or
yeah.
destroys the house.
House, yep,
The quote is, Hill House itself, not sane, stood against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, its walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone.
wow,
I love that.
yep,
I
that is
love that
good.
quote.
And it's,
Do you want?
yeah.
What? Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just say it's so true that the way that she portrays Hill House itself is kind of like you said, is almost a character, not so much
Mhm.
like a place. That
Yeah,
just adds up really well to this very true statement of, what or who Hill House is almost, you know what I mean?
yeah. It very much has its own like
Yeah,
sense of being.
yep,
Do you want to read the next quote about Hill House?
yes. Okay. It was a house without kindness, never meant to be lived in, not a fit place for people or for love or for hope. Exorcism cannot alter the countenance of a house. Hill House would stay as it was until it was destroyed. Also
Yeah,
very true, dude. So
yeah,
true when they're talking about that.
yeah. Exactly. Um, yeah, so that was probably the thing I liked most about this book was just the house in
Yeah,
general. I liked the idea that no matter where they went in the house, it was kind of like this labyrinth and they couldn't find their way
yeah,
around. And it wasn't just that it was a big house, it was almost like ever changing and like
for sure.
misdirecting.
Yep.
And there was even parts of the house, I think when they come in, like there I forget what it is, but like a certain room isn't where they thought it would be.
Yeah.
And like they went outside and the doctor was like, would you believe that that room that we saw inside is actually like way over there? And they're like, what? No, that's
Yeah.
impossible. And sure enough, they like went over there and it was.
Yep.
And then there was like a certain balcony that I think it was saying that there was these two balconies that are really far apart if you're standing on the outside, but when you're coming from the inside, you could like go right over to that balcony, like they practically meet. And so things like that were really cool. I liked the idea of kind of this like ever changing house.
For sure. It's like it's almost like different for everybody. Like everybody sees it the way that it's set up a different way almost.
Yeah, exactly. All right, what did you think of our main character, Eleanor?
So I'll be totally honest, I didn't quite understand a lot of Eleanor until the end. Like when I first started listening, I wasn't quite sure why she was there. And then later to figure out that she's kind of like homeless, but I still honestly I still don't understand why she came to the house. So maybe you can help me with that. Like I couldn't pick that up. I couldn't understand it. Couldn't get why. But with that said, her character I thought was really good, and I think that it paired so well with the house and the way that the house affects people, because she was like the ultimate like she was like the no, she was it. She was like the cause and effect of Hill House, right? Like she was
Right.
what it does to people and how it changes them and the way that it works. And so with that, I thought it was really good. And the way that they kind of it made her think and different and weird, and she would see different things and this, that, different thoughts was really good. But yeah, so I'm not, and maybe you can probably fill this in, but kind of why she got there, how she got there, I'm not quite sure of.
Yeah, so she had that paranormal experience when she was young.
Yeah.
And basically the Dr. Montague did all this like extensive research on people to figure out who he wanted to invite to
Okay.
Hill
Yeah.
House. And so when he read about her paranormal experience,
She
he
invited her.
invited
Okay,
her. He was one
that
of the
makes
ones.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes total sense. So then, yeah, I mean, that's really it. I thought they paired up so well, you know, the
Yeah.
house and her, and the way that she complimented the house, because really that's what it was, right? Like she was like really complimenting to the house's horror side and the kind of the scary aspect of it. And she was kind of used as like this vehicle of terrifying the other people and whatnot. So
Yeah, because she is like this extremely lonely person.
yeah,
And she is constantly looking for somewhere to belong.
yep,
When she shows up to this house and other people start showing up, she is so excited to have friends and to belong to a group, and she wants to be a part of this group so bad. And even Theodora, she's like, I want to, come live with you or whatever.
yeah,
And it's and they don't really want her because they know that she's like kind of weird.
yeah,
However, Hill House is actively, like we mentioned earlier, Hill House is actively seeking to
yeah,
consume people and to like
yep,
have people stay and become a part of the house.
yes,
And so she's looking for somewhere to belong, and this house is looking for someone to invite.
yep,
And so that was kind of cool, the way they worked together. Yeah, let's see, she's very childlike. On the way in, she steals her sister's car, even
yep,
though I think they both like kind of co-own it.
yeah,
She takes the car and she's like out on the road, and she just has these weird like daydreams as she's passing like this small town. She's like, oh, like I would live in that house and I would grow oleanders out by the road, and
yeah,
like kind of like has these ongoing thoughts about these houses that she's passing, and kind of like daydreaming this um kind of extended life in whatever area she's going by. Did you ever see the movie, I think it's just called Mitty, with Ben Stiller, and he like
mm-mm.
goes on all these grand adventures. He works for like Time magazine.
Is Mitty or
Um,
Smitty?
no, I think it's it.
Mitty? Okay.
Walter
For some,
Mitty is the character's name.
oh, okay. So no, I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, so he's kind of this person that is, I think if I remember correctly, he's like a reporter and he's kind
Yeah.
of going across the world to report on something. And the whole way that he's going, he has like these crazy like big daydreams, and
Yeah.
like they become like this huge reality in his head.
Oh, well.
And it shows it on screen. And then it kind of cuts back to him and he's just like daydreaming, going
Yeah.
on with the rest of his trip. And so I felt she was like really similar to that character. Like she would have like, as she's going, she's like coming up with this like whole extended life in her head, and then she would like cut back to the road and be driving again.
Yep.
Um, so she's had that paranormal experience, and she's hyper aware of her place in the social order of the group.
Yeah.
So throughout the whole thing, she's like questioning herself the whole time, like, oh, did I say something weird? Or
Yeah.
they all think I'm weird, and they all, they're all perceiving me this way, or they don't like me or whatever.
Yep.
And I think that if nothing else, that's very relatable.
Yeah, for sure.
Just kind of the way that she interacts with the rest of the group, and kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
She's so used to being kind of this recluse, right? So she's worried about when she does things or says things, it's like that, it's almost instantly to like, oh, did I say the right thing, or did I do this, or did they think that was okay and whatnot? And that's definitely relatable for a lot of people, I'm
Yeah,
sure, for me especially. So that was just like you said, super cool to see. And that was kind of refreshing, right? Like it was a refreshing, at
yeah,
least for me, it was refreshing to see somebody that kind of has that mindset and like then has to go and figure it out, past the social group and into like what's actually happening, I guess.
right. Because usually the main character of a story is kind of like this smooth talking, clever kind of
Yeah, and
person.
they're always on top of it and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was interesting to see somebody who like second guesses themselves, and kind of has like this, not flighty, but just kind of like,
So it's
she
she
kind
tries to
of,
like go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, she kind of jumps from thought to thought, like
Yeah.
very wildly. Um, and it was just interesting to kind of be in her head and watch her go from like connection to connection.
Yep.
Did you have something?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say it's almost like she kind of like tries to like not so much reassure herself, but like tell herself like, oh, okay, I did this and then this happens, or we're like, okay, so they must think this. It's always like kind of a self-report type thing, I
Yeah.
guess, which again, I can connect to. So
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Um, she so with that social kind of thing, she's trying to appear, like, I guess, cooler to the group, and she lies about her age and just who she is in general. People find out at the end that she's homeless.
yep,
um she's trying very hard to fit in. At the end they find out that she stole, I
her
mean, it's not
sister's.
exactly true, but
Yeah, but
they
yeah.
they believe she stole her sister's car and stuff. um and so it was interesting to see
Yep.
that everything she had said up to that point turned out to be a lie, because I don't think, unless it was stated at the very beginning, which it might have been, I didn't realize that she was homeless until the end when everybody else
Well, yeah,
found
so
out.
so I didn't either, and I remember because I talked to you and we were talking about it, and you're like, yeah, so she's homeless, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't know that, like I haven't heard that from you yet, and then at the end, I figured that out because when she, I was like sleeping in my sister's like baby's crib room on the floor, like kind of a,
Yeah.
it's kind of a homeless thing and whatnot. So yeah,
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because on the back of the book, it's like stating all the characters, and it's like,
yeah,
in a homeless girl, Eleanor. And I was like, because I was halfway through the book, and I'm like, isn't there supposed to be like a homeless person that comes to this house?
yeah,
And I went to the description and it said that she was the homeless person. And I'm like, is that just like a spoiler that they put in the description for some
yeah.
reason? Or like, what is that? So yeah, I was kind of like, okay.
Yep.
So did you have any like particular feelings about these other characters, the other characters in the story besides Eleanor?
Not, I wouldn't say not really. I think that Arthur would have been one that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. The way that he was introduced was, um, I guess I just it just spoke to me more than the others because, like I said, with the show, like it's so different, so it's hard for me to like bounce back. But I would say that Arthur would be the interesting one. You know, he had the revolver, right? Like he was like ready. He's like
Yeah.
seasoned ghost hunter. He's like, you know, I'll check everything out. I'll check under your bed. I'll check in the closet. I'll do all this stuff. And so I kind of like that he was that confident and that able to like deal with stuff. But other than that, I didn't have a whole lot of feelings about the other characters. I mean, I think they all played into it really well, but it
Right.
wasn't like nobody like poked out at me like crazy strong.
I hated Dr. Montague's wife.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
was such a, oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah. Over
I
and over again,
couldn't.
she's like, "Well, you just can't trust me. Why can't you
Yeah.
trust me? I've done this so." Okay, so I have to ask really quick, and hopefully this is not ruining other notes. But who is that? She kept calling somebody like Persephone or like per something or per whatever. And it was like the way it was, she's like attributed to Ouija board, but she was like, no, instead of a Ouija board, we have this
Oh, um, planchette.
planchette. So she was talking about planchette as it like it was the ghost that lives in Hill House, and I
So,
never figured that out. But that's the way that she like talked about planchette. She's like, so planchette told me that like this and this and this, and I was like, who the fuck is planchette? You know?
so I think because I was confused too, but I think planchette is the name of the tool that she uses
To talk to
to
the
ghost.
spirits. Okay, so
Because
that
like,
was my second thought was that.
yeah, because planchette is a planchette is like the thing that's shaped like that,
Okay.
and it's got like the little circle in it that people
Yeah.
use on the Ouija board and they
Okay.
push it
Yep.
around.
Yep. Yep.
And so that's what I know a planchette to be. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Well, no, I
yeah,
mean
it
that was
was it was her device that she had that helped her speak
okay,
to the
because the way that she
supernatural.
talked about it really tripped me out. Because she talked
I
about the
know,
planchette like it was its own. Planchette was a person. You know, it was like an
right?
entity that she spoke to, and then it wasn't because it's not. It's a like a tool that she uses. So that was really confusing for me. But at the same
Yeah,
time, I was also like, it's kind of cool. Like it was like cool
yeah,
the way that she used it to describe everything. But I was probably more confused than I was thinking that it was cool. So I would probably lean more on the confused side than anything else.
yeah. I thought that was super weird. It definitely took me off guard for
Yeah,
a while. Yeah, it was like, okay, and
yeah,
she was so like disregarding of anything that Dr. Montague was trying to tell her. Um, because her and Arthur show up and they're like, "Oh, we had a great night's sleep. We have no idea of like what you're talking about.
yeah,
Like it was fine
yeah,
here." And they're like, "Did you not hear all the crazy shit?"
yeah,
And they don't really, the thing is they don't really tell her everything that's happened. They just kind of accept her bullshit.
yeah.
And like, I'm like, dude, why aren't you guys telling her all the crazy shit that's been going on the past
For
few
real.
days? Like, why are you just taking her crap?
They're probably
Um,
so I had the same thought, and I thought in my head the reason why is because they're probably scared that like she would dismiss it, right? Like it would be a
yeah,
dismissal,
right.
which is kind of shitty, but that's kind of ultimately what happened. Like you know, whatever the wife's Montague was like, you know, no, I've done this so many times. You know, it's fine. Like I've talked to per whatever her name is because I can't remember names and yada
Planchette.
yada yada, Blanchette and yada yada yada. And finished up, but I was like, there's so much more to it than that. Like you're not getting the point here.
Right, exactly. I think, I really did like Luke from what I
Yeah,
see from other reviewers. Like a lot of people didn't like Luke. But I thought he was fine. I thought he was kind of funny. He was a little bit of the comic relief, and
yeah,
like he knows that he's rich, but he doesn't like take it too seriously.
yep,
It feels
for
like
sure.
he's
Yeah,
kind of like kind of like a playboy type character.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I liked Luke. I thought he was funny.
Yep. I would agree with
Um,
that.
but the character that I wanted to know the most about was Mrs. Dudley, which is like the groundskeeper's wife, the person that like
Okay.
cooked them food every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, because she was like very good at like distancing herself and telling them that she doesn't give any special treatment. She leaves every night before it gets dark and
Yep.
lives way over in the town, and that if they needed help, she wouldn't be able to get to them. She wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
hear them. And she like made it very, very clear. She's like, I leave every day.
Right after the
Like,
dinner bell. Yeah.
yeah. She's like, you cannot count on any help from me. Like
Man.
I don't give
Yep.
special treatment. I'm not gonna like fold your clothes or anything like that. Like I
Anything
am here to
past.
like give you food and go.
Yeah.
Um,
Dude, and I keep bringing this up, but the frickin' show speaks so much to her experience and like what she.
oh really?
Yes, it talks a lot about her, and even her husband comes in and says this big spiel about why they do what they do and what happened. And so it explains so much
Oh,
about Mrs. Dudley. And I know that this is like a book review, but I keep relating it to the show, but like I can't help myself. So pardon
yeah.
me, guys, for the show part of it, but I just got to
Yeah.
bring it up.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely gotta check that out.
You should. Yeah, it's good.
Um, yeah, I feel like I empathize with her so much because she just kind of like she like hates everybody that comes to the house because
Yeah, she
she's
just
like,
knows what's gonna
why?
happen. Yeah,
Yeah, she's like, why are you here? Like you
yeah,
don't need to be here. Like I
yep,
don't want to be here. Like
exactly.
why are you here?
Yeah,
And yeah, and then she keeps saying like what I agreed to. This isn't what I agreed to. This isn't what I
yep,
agreed
yep,
to.
yep.
And so I'm interested to know if like Dr. Montague hired her or if like the family who like owns the manor like hired them.
I think that I think that
I mean
even
it
in this book they talk about the fact that the family that they've done this for the family prior, right?
yeah,
That's
I was gonna say because the guy who was at the gate, her husband,
yeah,
didn't know who Dr. Montague was. She's like, Dr.
yeah,
Montague is expecting me. He's like, who's that?
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's weird. I would love to know more about the family that actually owns the house,
Yep,
like
yep.
the ones that don't live there but like live off property. Um, all right. Do you have any of we're gonna go into quotes, favorite quotes. Are any of these anything you want to mention?
So, yeah, okay. I'll read the first one here. Don't do it. Insist on your cup of stars. Once they have trapped you into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again. And I don't know if I'm pretty sure that has to do with Eleanor, right? Can you remember who's talking to Eleanor about that? Or if it's something different?
No, so it's Eleanor before she gets to the house and she's in the diner and
And
the little
okay.
girl has this cup of milk and
Okay,
she's like,
yeah.
"No, I want my cup with the stars on it."
Okay.
And the parents are like, "Oh, you need to grow up. You don't need your
But no,
starry cup in
yeah,
order to drink
okay.
your milk."
Yep. So that's
Yeah.
right. That's a really good one.
Yeah, because Eleanor is just like, you know, she's like, if you let them get their foot in the door, if you let them start taking away
They're
things that
gonna,
are special to you,
yep, they're gonna
like
go.
they're gonna strip you of everything that
Yep,
you hold dear. And once you're like everyone else, you can never go back.
for sure.
And so I really like that a lot. Probably the most fucking hated line in this book, because it gets said so many times, is journeys end in lovers meeting. How many fucking times did they say journeys end in lovers meeting?
Several, and I have no idea what it means. I
I
still don't
got
know what it means.
so sick of it. I think it's just like this kind of high idea that oh, whenever you have this big life experience, whenever you go on like this big journey, like you end up like the fairy tale ending is that you end up with, you meet your lover, you meet your
And
like
yeah, and then
future
you end
spouse or
there. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And so that was kind of this idea in her head. She's like, oh, journeys end in lovers meeting. And so she's thinking that she's going to be with Luke or Theodora, depending on how you read the book.
yep,
And you know, it's really Luke and Theodora that end up together. You know,
yeah,
they end up going off on their own thing, and that kind of starts this rift. Even it had kind of started before, but it really like cements this rift in the group. um but yeah, I hated that so much. And like one time it would have been fine, but it was quoted like 30 times throughout the entire book.
yep.
Anytime she was going up and down the stairs, or anytime she was having like an inner monologue or anything, it was at the end of it was like, oh, journeys end and lovers meeting.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
yep.
um do you want to read this first quote about fear? I have three really good quotes about fear that
Yeah,
I think
so
are really cool.
fear, the doctor said, is the relinquishment of logic, the willing relinquishment of reasonable patterns. We yield to it or we fight it, but we cannot meet.
Yeah, so it's kind of this idea that, you know, as humans we have like this logical brain,
Yep,
and fear is doing away with
with
logic. Like
logic, yeah,
like blind fear is not logical.
yep.
It's the relinquishment of reasonable thinking. We yield to it or we fight it. You either do one or the other, but you
But you can't
can't
meet it halfway, yeah.
you can't meet fear halfway. I absolutely love
For
that.
sure. It's so true.
You either get overcome by it or you overcome it, but there's no middle ground.
Yep,
To learn what we fear is to learn who we are. Horror defies our boundaries and illuminates our souls, which is a super,
yep,
super interesting thing. I think, you know, to really know somebody on the deepest possible level is to know what they fear, because we often don't want to tell our fellow humans like what we like deep down, like what we really fear,
yep,
because on some instinctual level that when somebody knows that, they can use it against us. And it's kind of
yep,
like this caveman lizard brain way of thinking, right? And so even though somebody probably wouldn't use your worst fear against you, like that's how much we humans fear that situation, right? And so to learn what we fear is to really know who someone is, like what they are at their core. When you know what somebody fears, you probably know a lot more about them too.
yep. And with that too, it says to learn what we fear, to learn what we fear is to learn who we are. Horror defines our boundaries and illuminates our souls. That's
Yeah.
pretty deep.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Like to know, like if you know what your fears are, you know what your boundary
Yep,
of like safeness is or
yep. We
whatever.
can
Like you know what
handle,
your
yeah.
general, yeah. um no, the menace of the supernatural is that it attacks where modern minds are weakest, where we have abandoned our protective armor of superstition and have no substitute defense.
Yeah,
So I thought that was pretty good, because you know we feel like we have like these modern minds that have kind of overcome like this caveman thinking of being
yep,
scared of the dark, but that's what fear is. It's like the parts of our brain that are not rational, like and this is why I put the three quotes together, is because the first one, it goes back to the first one. Fear is the relinquishment of logic. Like
yep,
fear is the lack of logic and reasonable thinking. And so then going to the third quote, the the menace of the supernatural is that it attacks where our modern minds are weakest. So it attacks the parts of the brain that, you know, are not acting so logical, if that makes
Yep.
sense.
No, that totally does.
Yeah, I love that. Um, okay, so I added this quote just to kind of make fun of it. So Eleanor has this thing that she says to the group, and it's one of the things that's just kind of like, what? And sometime before this, the doctor had asked her if she knew how to play the game bridge.
Yeah.
And in her head, she's like, I know how to play bridge. I like apple pies with cream on them. I drove here all by myself with my
Yeah.
own two
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about? Um, and so there's also this quote is a little bit longer. And she's like, I was wondering earlier, Eleanor said, feeling she had somehow an apology to make to all of them. I thought I was altogether calm, and yet now I know I was terribly afraid. She frowned, puzzled, and they watched for her to go on. When I am afraid, I can see perfectly the sensible, beautiful, not afraid part of the world. I can see the chairs and the tables and the windows staying the same, not affected in the least. And I can see things like the careful woven texture of the carpet not even moving. But when I am afraid, I no longer exist in any relation to these things. I suppose because things are not afraid. So it's just a really long-winded, odd way to say chairs don't chairs aren't afraid because they are an inanimate object and they don't have the same brain, like they don't have a brain like we do.
Yeah.
And also like I think something else she might have been going for was like, you know, when you are afraid, everything around you seems menacing in a way. Like if you're in a scary haunted house and the lights are all down low, every like chair or like coat sticking out of a closet is going to look like something and be scary, right?
Yep.
But you know, I think what she's getting at is when she's not afraid, she can see that these things are not that. But when she is afraid, everything seems very scary and menacing.
Yep.
And I just think that there had to be a better way to say that, because
Yeah.
when when I first read that, I was literally like, what the fuck did she just say? Like what? Yeah, there was so many moments like
Yep.
that. Um, all right, cruising on through to our favorite moments. So when the ghost is knocking on the door high above where a person could knock, like high above where the doctor could
Yep.
reach, high above where Luke could reach.
Yep.
There's no one who could be like messing with them really. And so that was probably like really the only scary moment for me. Um, the other part that was a little scary was Eleanor holds what she thinks is Theodora's hand in the middle of the night, but Theodora isn't there. And so it's kind of this idea of like whose house or whose hand was it? But also it kind of goes back to the relationship between the house and Eleanor. The house
Yep.
wants to comfort her and wants her to be there, and
Yeah.
she wants to belong. And so in the middle of the night, like this kind of ghostly house is like holding her hand in the middle of the night. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
thought that was interesting.
No, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree.
Did you have any like favorite moments from this book, or was it all kind of the same.
It was yeah, I don't know if I had any favorite moments, like it was like really poked out and was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I think that the book being said from Eleanor's point of view was very interesting in the sense of, you know, like you said, it's like her kind of spiral into madness almost, right? Like
Yeah.
she got all that crazy shit going on, and and slowly towards the end, it gets more crazy and more like wild, in the way that she thinks about stuff and like what's happening, like where she figures out she is, and then all of a sudden she's like, wait, why am I here? Why is this happening? And
Yeah.
whatnot. Um, so yeah, that's probably it. It was wild, at least in Eleanor's perspective towards the end.
Right.
It was pretty crazy.
And once you realize kind of when that final scene happens where she's like dancing around the house and kind
Yeah,
of running
and
up.
she's up on the stairs, and right, Luke's trying to like get to her and whatnot and all the rest, and like she doesn't understand where she is or what's going on and all the
Right.
rest. Yeah, exactly.
And once you realize, I think that was kind of the point where, because when that scene first happens, I was kind of like, what is going
Yeah,
on? But you realize that this entire time she's been a unreliable narrator. Like
yeah, yeah,
we can't really trust anything that's happening because it's through her point of
for
view.
sure. Yep.
And so then you kind of realize, if you look back on the prior conversations throughout the book, you're like, oh, she has slowly been going insane.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this realization that you're along the ride with her. Like
Yep.
you are kind of like this whole time you haven't, like, nobody's really known besides the other people in the house. And like looking back on it, we can kind of see some of the things they said, like Eleanor always trying to be the center of attention, and like
Yep.
Eleanor acting weird again and stuff. And it's like, why are people saying that? But then when you realize that you have kind of been inside Eleanor's head this whole time, and that something has been happening to her, and
Yeah.
that you can't trust the narrative,
Yep.
it's like, oh, so there's been things that are going on that Eleanor hasn't seen, therefore the reader hasn't seen. Um, and so it's kind of this interesting reveal as far as like where you are point of view wise.
For sure. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it's crazy because that, you know, the very ending of this book, right, is Eleanor, and everybody's like asking her like, you need to leave. Like Arthur's like, you gotta
Yeah.
go, like we can't do this, like you're not stable, you're not ready. And or
Yeah.
I shouldn't say not ready, but not stable. And then she leaves, and all of a sudden, like she's thinking about the stuff, and she's headed right towards a tree.
Yeah.
She runs herself right into a tree because of the house and because of what it's
Yeah.
doing. And so it's like, whoa, you know, you get this like perspective of like how controlled she is from this house, and the reason why she wanted to stay so bad, because this house is just like speaking to her, like, hey,
Right.
I need you to stay, I need you to do this and this and this, and then she's gone.
Y-
Then it's the game
Yeah.
over.
Even on her way down the driveway, she's like thinking like, I'll just turn around. Like, all like
Yeah, yep,
I can't leave here. Like the
yeah,
house needs me and I need the house. And like kind of this thought. And then all of a sudden she realizes that like she's headed for this tree. And then at the last moment, she says, why am I doing this? Why don't they
exactly.
stop me? And
Yep,
then the
yep,
chapter ends.
yep.
And I thought that was a really, really great ending,
No, I agree. I
because
totally agree.
the house the house is going to make her stay one way or the other,
Yep.
like whether she physically stays or dies on the
Because it wants her
premises.
there. Yeah, regardless soul or not, it wants her there bad.
And so you wonder if the other people who died, if they were trying to leave, like
Mm,
if they were trying to go, and it killed them before they
yep,
could leave.
for sure.
So yeah, what so what more would you like what more would have liked to have answered in this story? Like, what
I would have
are
loved
there
to
any
figure out,
things?
yeah, not like a lot more, but I would have loved to figure out more of what Eleanor's connection to the house was. you know, like the reason behind why she was so intertwined with the house and the way that it acted, and whatnot. But that's probably it. Like that, at least, you know, I listened to the last part of it like not even 5 hours ago, right? Like when I was at work and whatnot, and I finished it, and that was the ending, right? And then, so I was like just like wondering like what more could there have been with her and the house, and what, because she was forced out, you know, she was pushed out by so many people, and so many. Arthur was like, you got to go, you can't do this, like we're going to drive you to interstate whatever, and we'll get you home to your sister's house and whatnot. So that would probably be my question, is like, what, you know, what more was Eleanor involved with the house to the point where it was like so attached to her? Because that's like at the end, that's what it was. Like it was so incredibly attached to Eleanor that that's why it affected, you know, her to the point of like, you know, suicide basically is what it was. So yeah, that would be my question.
Yeah, I would have loved to have found out more about like what connection, if any, the people that died there in the past, what connection do they have to the house, and are they part of the haunting
that's going on with Eleanor? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so yeah, I think I would have just liked to have had a more concrete answer as far as like the haunting. I think I would have rather I think I really just wanted more things to happen. I feel like there was maybe like 3 points in the story where like events were taking place. I just like, want like more stuff to happen.
Connections. You wanted more connections that you could see and like feel and then understand and connect with. Yeah. I totally agree.
But yeah, and then there's the question of did Eleanor bring the haunting with her? Like did she have a ghost that followed her into the house and then was kind of expounded upon in this house that already had like a psychic energy of its own?
For sure. Yep.
Yeah, I honestly this would have been a fine first book if it had been a trilogy. But knowing that it's a standalone, I feel a little disappointed as I got to the end of it. I think if there was a sequel and I had finished this book knowing that there was a sequel, I would have been like, okay, like I understand why everything wasn't answered. Like we'll keep going. But yeah, I got to the end and I was kind of like, that was a great ending. I like that she like kind of drove into the tree and it was like this whole thing. But overall, I just wanted more. I liked the general idea of the book. I liked the setting. I even liked the idea of not actually seeing a physical ghost, but more of just like this stuff is happening and no one can explain it. But I just wanted more of it.
Yeah, for sure. So at the end, they talked about the nun that gets built or into the wall, right? And so they talk about Mrs. Montague is like saying like, no, I talked to, again, I'm sorry, I forgot the name. What's the name of the tool she uses? Planchette. So she's talking to Planchette or whatever it is, and she's like, no, there was a nun that was built into this wall and whatnot. And so that was like that. I feel like, and again, I think this is what you said, but they didn't expound enough upon that point, right, to where we could really understand what that was or what was going on with the nun of the wall. Because that was a point, that was a point that she made. She's like, wait, no, listen, like they told me that there was a nun in the wall. Like never before have they been wrong. Like they've always told me, and they've been honest, and they've done this and that. And so that might have been cool to see. And again, I'm so sorry to relate this show, but with the show, they do expound upon that, and you see more of that. And so that's kind of cool. But yeah, that was probably one of the things where like I read and I listened and I was like, okay, yeah, so that has to do with this. And then they almost just kind of stopped. Like they didn't go much further than the fact that there could be, none that was like built into the wall or killed in the wall, or however they said it. They said it in a certain way where it was like, this happened and that there was a nun in the wall and yada yada yada. So
yeah, and that was another thing, and that was kind of what I brought up about when the wife gets there, the book is over in the next hour or so.
Yep.
And so I'm like, what was even the point of having the wife come out there with Arthur?
Yep.
Like, what did that do to the narrative? Because we don't get any of those answers. Like, all the things
Yep.
she brought up, like, we don't get answers to any of that.
For
So
sure.
why bring her into the plot at all?
Yep. Yep. I totally
Yeah.
agree.
But doing this book, it really made me in getting ready for this book, it made me look at a lot of other horror books.
Yeah.
And it really made me think, like, maybe horror might be something that I want to read.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of good ones that I found, and from what I've seen from people, it's really hard to find like a really, really scary one, because I think that's just something that's difficult to pull off in book form.
Yep.
But there was a lot of really cool concepts that I came across. Like there's like a 40-hour book called Carry and Comfort that had to do with it had to do with vampires, but I think they're different than how you would normally see them. They're like really like really serious, really well done dark vampires.
Yep. Yep.
And that's definitely something that I want to read. I've heard it's very like graphic and very like serious and very there's a lot of really messed up things that happen.
Yeah.
So that sounded like a good one. There was a couple others that sounded a little bit more like thrillers, like kind of like a suspense, thrilling kind of story that I have my eyes on, that I added to my wish list. So, although I wish we had done like maybe a more modern book for this episode, it definitely opened my eyes a lot more to the genre.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of had me looking into things a little bit more. So
yep,
we'll probably do another horror book at some point.
Yeah,
We'll come back to it.
Yep, nothing was lost. It was very nice to jump back into horror and kind of see how it affects you and see the way that it plays out towards the end. And I think that there's probably plenty of other horror books that we could read that are like, very very in your face, kind of like whoa type stuff.
Right.
Which is, again, Hill House wasn't like not that, but it was I don't know, it's hard to explain, and I'm sure you agree, but it's just
I didn't really have any problem listening to it even at night. The only part that tripped me out a little bit was both times it was late at night for me, and it was when the door was getting knocked on and when Eleanor grabbed the hand in the dark. Those were the two times, but otherwise, like, I didn't really have a problem reading it. But I'm excited to read more in the genre. And
for sure.
If you guys, the listeners, have any books that you think that we should read and check out, definitely let us know down below in the comments. I think is that all we got on this?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we burned through all the notes, so yeah.
All right. All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening to us ramble, complain, and praise The Haunting of Hill House. If you'd like to support us and follow our content, please like and subscribe, and follow us over on Twitter at Files Fantasy, or look up the Fantasy Files podcast. Have a fantastic and safe Halloween, and tell us in the comments below if you liked The Haunting of Hill House, or if you've ever had your own paranormal experience. We'd love to hear from you guys and hear your stories on that for sure. So join us next week for The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Our friend Chris will be joining us, and we're going to have a fantastic time doing that. We're looking forward to that so much. Until next time, journeys end in lovers meeting, I guess. Probably.
Oh, I love it, dude.